Hey guys, welcome to the first video of 2021 on UFC Betting Edge, and I can't tell you how much I missed watching fights, analyzing them. I'm so glad we're back. We have three cards within a span of a week, so it's gonna be busy. So let's get into it. The first fight on this card is Punahele Soriano versus Dusko Todorovic. And this is a really interesting fight where two contender series alumni are facing each other, and we shall see who's going to win. So Soriano has probably a little bit of experience disadvantage coming into this fight. He's looked really impressive in all his wins. He is a power puncher who likes to finish fights early. He also has an All-American wrestling background and looks to utilize takedowns only when he gets tired. This has happened only once in his career against Jamie Pickett on the Contender Series matchup. He was doing really well with strikes throughout the fight, but as he started to get tired, he started taking the fight to the ground. He's a southpaw and has crisp striking, but he can telegraph his punches. You can actually see him just, throwing those big haymakers, and someone like Dusko can evade them nicely, even though his evading style is not the best either, and we'll get to that. So Punahele throws winging punches that carry a lot of power. In his last fight against Oscar Pichota in the UFC, he hurt him multiple times before actually knocking him out clean. He pressures his opponent not with constant attack, but by moving forward and creating that pressure. He has nice trip takedowns and a really good power double. It is still to be seen, how the wrestling transitions will go when he's not tired and the other person is a skilled grappler like Dusko. He has good kicks as well. The only big hole that I see in his game is his cardio, and that was in the only fight that went to the distance in his career, which was against Jamie Pickett. He was definitely slowing down, and this is something that you might want to keep an eye on. Now, talking about Todorovic, he's a Serbian talent who is coming off a really good win against Dequan Townsend, and he was able to take the fight to the ground and finish the fight by brutal ground and pound. So he's been to 15 minutes only once, but you could definitely see that he had a much better cardio than Punahele. He also has really good power. He has really good head movement, but he doesn't keep his hands up. And against Punahele, it's not the wisest move, I would say. He is excellent in the clinch and has great control with a lot of dirty boxing. He throws over 8 strikes a minute, and with that kind of output, you definitely putting a lot of pressure on someone as inexperienced as Punahele. He does get hit a fair bit, but he has a good chin. Sometimes he just turtles up and just keeps moving until the opponent gets tired and he can resume his attack. Soriano is extremely dangerous, especially in the early parts, say 5 to 8 minutes. And he can totally knock Dusko out if he lands clean. So there's definitely a chance for that. Dusko will try to make him work, carry his weight in the clinch, and make Soriano punch himself out. And I think that's when Dusko will put the pressure up. He's probably going to wear Soriano down and finish the fight either by decision or a late finish. So if we look at the odds, we can see that the odds offered by Bet365 are much closer but I favor Dusko quite a bit. I feel that he's looked like a seasoned opponent. He knows what it's to like what it's to like to go the distance. He has high output, and he's the perfect stylistic opponent for Soriano to get him tired and then take over from there. So I think a good pick on this will be Dusko straight or Dusko by decision. Okay, so this next fight is also in the middleweight division, and it's between Alessio Di Quirico versus Joaquin Buckley. Now, let's talk about Buckley first. So Buckley is coming into this fight with two spectacular knockout wins where he looked really impressive. He lands about 4.9 strikes a minute at a 38% clip, so you can imagine he throws a lot, and his work rate is very impressive. It's especially impressive when you see the build on him and how muscled he is. He absorbs 5.5 strikes a minute, and I think some of that is due to the fight with Kevin Holland, which he lost by a third round knockout. He's a really powerful guy who does not cut weight, weighs in around 183 pounds, so he's probably be at a size disadvantage, but he's an extremely strong ox of a man. He'll probably have a height and reach disadvantage too, but it hasn't seemed to bother him in the last two fights. So that is really good if you're looking to bet on Joaquin Buckley. He carries big power, throws a number of combinations, and maintains that power and aggression throughout the fight. He has definitely shown improvements after his first loss, or when he debuted in the UFC, lost to Kevin Holland. Was obviously a hard fight, but he got better and produced two knockouts, including the knockout of the year. He definitely has the speed advantage in this fight, and he has really good takedown defense, which I see at 100%. So it will be hard for Di Quirico to take him down. Now, let's talk about Alessio Di Quirico. Di Quirico is 2-3 in his last 5 fights and 0-3 in the last 3. So he's definitely on a downward trend. It could very well be marching orders for him, especially when Italy has a much more renowned middleweight talent in Marvin Vettori. So this is a do or die fight for Alessio Di Quirico. Di Quirico lands about 3.2 strikes a minute, but absorbs about 3.3. His defense is pretty impressive at 62%. He's a very basic striker, but he has good power. He relies heavily on his overhand right, and he just doesn't throw enough punches to set it up right. He might have to utilize his takedowns in this fight in order to gain a little bit of advantage on Buckley, but I don't see him getting him down, not easily for sure, and he would kind of expend some energy in there. So to summarize this is a showcase fight for Buckley, and the advantage with this is they can get the marching orders for Di Quirico, who hasn't looked impressive. Stylistically, Buckley has advantage in most parts of the game. He's got more power, higher speed, better gas tank. His chances of hurting Di Quirico is much higher than the other way around. Takedowns will be key for Di Quirico, but Buckley's takedown is 100%. And he's fought a wrestler in Impaka Sanganai, and I believe Jordan Wright also tried to take him down because he has got really good jiu-jitsu. Now look at the odds. Buckley is definitely the favorite, and I think the lines are more or less correct. I'm giving Di Quirico just a tiny little more chance. However, the difference is that the bookmakers think that Buckley is going to finish the fight, and the probability is over 50%. I, however, think that As phenomenal and strong Buckley is, Di Quirico also has a really good chin. And obviously, your chin could deteriorate, but I think Di Quirico can take this. So the smart money on this fight could be Buckley by decision, which can give you big bucks here, almost 3-1 odds. So the next one is in the welterweight division, and I'm really excited about the return of Santiago Ponzinibbio against Li Jingliang. Ponzinibbio was on the cusp of getting a title shot, and from there he had like a bad layoff. So let's get into this one. So Ponzinibbio was scheduled to fight Kamaru Usman, and I think it was Usman who got injured, and then he was matched up against Neil Magny. He totally destroyed Neil Magny after dominating him for 3 rounds. He finished him with a really a real knockout in the 4th. Ponzinibbio has 7 wins in a row against opponents such as Mike Perry, Gunny Nelson, Neil Magny, as I mentioned, Nordine Taleb, Zach Cummins. He had a lot of momentum in 2018, but all that is gone since his injuries, and it's truly heartbreaking. He was fighting for his life in 2019 with blood infection first and then a bone infection. He was in a real bad shape, but has taken about 9 to 10 months in 2020 to get better before making his comeback now in 2021. So what we have to see is if Ponzinibbio is going to be conservative and try to scrape by, or he's going to come for Jingliang's head. Because whenever there's such a big layoff, there's always, people or fighters deal with layoffs very differently. So we got to see how Ponzinibbio deals with it. We also have to see how evolved his game is with multiple injuries in the last 2 years. How much has he been able to train? How much has he been able to evolve his game? So I'm going to make an educated guess, and because he trains with the American top team, which has the best, one of the best coaching staff, I think he will be evolved, and he'll be talking to a lot of other fighters in his division and the others, and keeping an eye on what's happening in the game and how it's evolving. So Ponzinibbio likes to push his opponents back, and he lands around about 4.3 strikes a minute with an accuracy of 39%, which is a high work rate. He absorbs around about 4 strikes a minute with the defense being at 64%. He likes to keep the fight on the feet and land devastating punches. He pressures his opponent and tries to pin them to the cage, peppers them with leg kicks in the process, and then when they are corralled against the cage, he unleashes his crisp boxing combinations, and they have a lot of power. Now, talking about Li Jingliang, he's coming into this fight with a 3-2 record, and he has been really impressive in a couple of fights, especially with Zaleski dos Santos, where he outstruck dos Santos in the 1st and 2nd round and then finished him off with an amazing combination in the 3rd. His last outing was against Neil Magny, and in that fight he started pretty well, but then he was out-grappled and he was controlled in the clinch by Neil Magny. Neil Magny showed a lot of intelligence in that fight to win that contest. Now, Jingliang lands about 4.5 strikes a minute with 42% accuracy and absorbs about 3.7 strikes a minute with a defense of 59%. He packs a lot of power, and he throws vicious combinations, especially hooks, after he traps his opponents next to the cage. He also has a really good straight right that he deploys every now and then. He's most dangerous when he moves forward, throwing punches recklessly. He usually does that when his opponents are hurt, and he needs to be extremely careful against Ponzinibbio, because Ponzinibbio can clean your clock out real quick. Jing Liang might look to take or get a takedown in this fight, but I don't see it happening considering the strength disadvantage that he might have. So to summarize, this is going to be a fun fight as both fighters come game, and they are tough as nails. They can take a shot. It will be interesting to see Ponzinibbio's approach as he looked both attacking and measured in his fight against Magny and Perry. So I think we're probably going to see the same Ponzinibbio looking attacking as well as measured. Jing Liang might try to take this fight to the ground if he's getting a leg kicked a lot, or if he's getting punched and he doesn't like Ponzinibbio's power. He might try to take the fight down, but I don't see that happening considering Ponzinibbio's superior strength or strength advantage, at least in my opinion. Ponzinibbio has knockout power, and he can knock any welterweight out on his day. But given how strong the chin for Li Jing Liang is, I think this fight will go to a decision. Now, if you look at the odds that I have given in this fight is pretty close to the Bet365 odds. They believe in Santiago a little more than I do, which is okay. However, I think the value play lies on Santiago by decision, considering what I just mentioned about Li Jing Liang's chin. So I would say Santiago by decision. I would probably not bet in this fight, and if I have to, I'll take Ponzinibbio by decision. So the next is the co-main event. I'm really excited about this one. It's between Matt Brown and Carlos Condit. So Matt Brown is coming off of a brutal knockout loss against the Caramel Thunder Miguel Baeza, where he actually managed to hurt Baeza in the first round before getting knocked out himself. Before that fight, he finished Ben Saunders via punches in December of 2019. So these were the two fights after the retirement stint of Matt Brown, and he looked pretty good in those two fights. So Matt Brown throws just over 3.8 strikes a minute with an accuracy of 54%. After coming back from retirement, he has averaged around 4 strikes a minute. On the defensive aspect, he absorbs a little less than 2.7 strikes a minute and has a striking defense of 55%. He uses a lot of foot sweeps for takedowns, and they could be crucial for him, in a clinch situation where Condit's Achilles heels has been his, ground game and not being able to reverse the position and just being stuck down. So something that Matt Brown needs to keep an eye on. Matt Brown is deadly when he presses his opponent against the cage, and he throws those deadly elbows and knees. There have been many finishes, including Diego Sanchez. One of the issues about Matt Brown's game is that he sticks his chin up while he's throwing punches and attacking. Now, Condit can totally find that chin, and Condit, can land a killer punch. So Matt Brown has to be really careful. Another thing is Matt Brown's susceptibility to body kicks. So Carlos Condit can definitely target that body from southpaw stance. Now, let's talk about Carlos Condit. Condit is coming off of a solid decision victory over Kurt McGee after getting 5 losses in a row. Now, bear in mind, those 5 losses also include the fight for the championship against Robbie Lawler a few moons ago. And I thought Condit won the fight handily. Lawler poured it in the 5th round and managed to squeak a split decision, but I think Condit won that. And who knows how the war would have panned if Condit won that fight. So what I'm trying to tell you is Condit is really good. He, in the last few fights, have struggled against grappling heavy guys like Damien Maia, Michael Chiesa, and to some extent Neil Magny. Condit lands about 3.7 strikes per minute with 39% accuracy and absorbs about 2.5 strikes a minute with about 57% defense. He has a much broader arsenal of strikes, and he will be the longer and the taller guy in this fight. Condit moves a lot during the fight, and that's what his main line of defense is. So what Condit needs to ensure is not get trapped against the cage, which he does a fairly good job of. Condit uses a lot of kicks, and he can maintain distance on Matt Brown and possibly hurt his body for a TKO. Now, to summarize, this fight could easily happen a decade ago, and I would have preferred it then. But nonetheless, this is going to be a fun film. It's totally a fight of the night contender. Both the fighters, as I mentioned, are past their primes and have been fairly inactive in the last 2 years. And they're both making some sort of a comeback. I'm glad that this is not really a tailor-made bad matchup for Condit, as Matt Brown will not grapple fuck him with the same kind of strength as Maia or Chiesa. If this stays at a distance, Condit is probably going to take it by decision, by avoiding strikes and having a lot of movement with landing kicks and long range punches. However, I see it going to the clinch where things might get interesting. I see the fight playing out really close there, and I'll probably give slight advantage to Matt Brown in the clinch scenario. Brown has nasty elbows, but Condit has a granite chin, and I don't see him getting knocked out. I don't think Carlos Condit has ever been stopped with strikes, and this is not going to be his first time. On top, Condit and Brown both have dangerous game. But Brown's game does not have as many submission threats. So on the whole, I give the ground edge to Condit based on more paths to victory being there for Condit. I'll take Condit by decision, but I won't be surprised if Condit ends this with a finish. Matt Brown is susceptible to the body kick, and that's how I see the fight going. I probably give close to a 60% chance to Condit to win, but let's look at the odds here. So the odds are really close. If I compare it to Bet365, we're pretty much identical on the win odds. If we look at the props, what I can see is there's definitely value on Condit by decision. Okay, so now the main event, and this is between Max Holloway and Kelvin Kattar. Now I'm really excited about this fight because there are so many similarities in these two fighters. You know, the way they're built, to the volume and so on. And this is the first time Holloway is facing someone with that crisp of a striking with the same height and body type. And I think Kattar's 3-inch reach advantage will be key here. So Holloway lands almost 6.5 strikes a minute, and his output usually increases as the fight progresses. Yeah, he has a striking accuracy of 44%, and he absorbs about 4.5 strikes a minute and possesses a defense of 61%, which is pretty good. He also rolls with his punches, so he doesn't get caught cleanly. Holloway, until his last fight against Volkanovski, focused on striking the head and sometimes to the body, but he did not make a lot of attempts to hit the legs. However, he mixed things nicely, especially in the early part of the Volkanovski fight, and this was the first time where I saw that Holloway is trying to change his game a little bit. And I think that was due to the fact that it was Volkanovski and he needed to do something else to win the fight. Holloway is a master of distance and gets away from strikes masterfully. Even if he takes a shot, they don't hit him that flush. He gets them as he's moving away from the strikes. Holloway has great chin, and he's taken a lot of punishment in the Poirier fight and did not even concede a knockdown. And after that Poirier fight, he's fought Volkanovski, and he has looked pretty good. So I feel that the impact of all those punches against Poirier wasn't as significant, and especially considering the fact that he hasn't been sparring in the last two fights, I think that's helped his chin considerably. So I like him not sparring for this fight. Now, Kelvin Kattar lands about 5 strikes a minute and has an accuracy of 41%. He absorbs close to 5.7 strikes a minute, and it's probably skewed by the Renato Moicano fight. I think it's one of the first few fights that he had in the UFC, and he was outstruck probably 4-1 in that fight. So I think that probably causes a little bit of skew here. Usually he's much more, he probably will have a striking differential on his side than his opponents. Kattar primarily targets the head, but has brought down percentage of strikes from head at 85 in his early fights to about 60 to 65%. So what he's doing is he's mixing up his strikes. He's definitely putting new elements in his game where he's changing the level, going to a head, then to the body, and then coming down with the knee in the middle. So he's definitely doing those adjustments in the fight. He does take time to warm up, and he gauges the opponent's movements before he strikes or tries to implement his game plan. He has phenomenal boxing and packs a lot of power. I will give power advantage to Kelvin Kattar. His most effective strike is his educated jab, and he follows it up with a crisp 1-2, and he follows it up with uppercuts and hooks. He paces himself well for 5-round fights, even though there is a huge experience disadvantage upon with respect to quality opponents. Both have faced great opponents, but Holloway is much higher. So to summarize, this is definitely going to be a fun fight, definitely a contender for fight of the night, and the two are very similar in a lot of ways. Both of them are extremely tall and big for this weight class. Both fighters utilize boxing to get it done for the most part, but both fighters have started to utilize leg kicks and some other tools off late to get their games evolving. Both fighters increase their output as the fight goes on. Kattar might have better offensive boxing, but Holloway has better defense. Both fighters have iron chin. Holloway, the difference between the two is he wears damage much better. He doesn't bleed. He doesn't, get his nose all red. On the other hand, Kelvin Kattar shows damage on his face, and that could sway judges' scorecards in some ways. Something that we need to keep in mind. I haven't really looked when I was analyzing the fights. I hadn't looked at the odds then, and I typically gave a 60-40 to Holloway after looking. But I won't be surprised if Kattar wins by improving considerably. I think he needs a little bit of improvement in order to beat Holloway, and that is completely possible. Now, if you look at the odds, I am pretty much in line with the odds, and I think Holloway should be a slight favorite given the fact that he has high volume, he has a proven chin, and he increases the output as the fight goes on, just like Kattar. So this is going to be a fun fight, and if I think there is money to be made, it's probably on Holloway straight. It's a tricky fight. It can go either way, but I would say Holloway by decision. Thanks so much for watching the videos, guys. I'm really excited that the fights are back now. I'll be posting another video on Sunday for the Wednesday's card headline between Neil Magny and Michael Chiesa. And then after that, I'll be posting a video on Thursday that will be for the main card of Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier. So stay tuned. This is a heavy week, and we're gonna make the most out of it. Okay, see you on Sunday.